On a crisp November night in 2000, Michael J. Fox stood before a sea of faces, his smile as bright as ever, but his body betraying a secret he could no longer hide. The spotlight cut through the darkness, landing on a man whose boyish grin had charmed millions. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the microphone, addressing a crowd gathered not for a movie premiere, but for a cause that would become his life's work. At 39, the man who made the world believe in time travel was running out of time himself. Diagnosed with Parkinson's disease nearly a decade earlier, he was launching the Michael J. Fox Foundation, a beacon of hope for millions. How did a kid from Canada, who once conquered Hollywood, find himself fighting a battle bigger than any blockbuster? He was Marty McFly, the eternal teenager, the kid who made the 80s feel like a wild ride into the future. His charm was a superpower, his optimism a promise that anything was possible. From Family Ties to Back to the Future, Michael J. Fox wasn't just a star, he was a phenomenon, a name that lit up marquees and hearts alike. His laughter echoed through sold-out theaters, his quick wit a spark that ignited every room. But beneath the applause, a shadow was growing, a tremor in his hand, a diagnosis in 1991, a truth he kept hidden from the world for 7 years. When he finally spoke his truth in 1998, the world stopped. Parkinson's disease, a progressive, incurable condition, was now part of his story. At 29, he'd been told his career might end, his future uncertain. Yet here he was in 2000, turning pain into purpose, trading the spotlight for a mission. This was the moment, the defining moment, when Michael J. Fox chose to fight, not for himself, but for millions. The crowd rose in a standing ovation, his smile unwavering, but his eyes told a deeper story. Behind the charisma was a man grappling with a body that no longer obeyed, a future that no longer promised certainty. He wasn't just a celebrity. He was a husband, a father, a human being staring down a disease that would test his spirit. His laughter, once his calling card, became his armor, his optimism, his rebellion. But the road to this moment was paved with triumphs and trials, moments of joy and nights of doubt. To understand Michael J. Fox, you have to go back to a small house in Burnaby, British Columbia, where a kid with a big heart and an even bigger dream first picked up a guitar and dared to imagine a life beyond the ordinary. He was small in stature, but boundless in ambition. A boy who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. His journey would take him from Canadian suburbs to Hollywood's brightest stages, from sitcom sets to global stardom, and then to a diagnosis that would change everything. This is the story of a man who didn't just chase time, he redefined it. What does it mean to live when every second counts? Michael J. Fox's story is not just about fame or a diagnosis. It's about a boy who dreamed big, a star who fell, and a man who rose again, not for applause, but for hope. His courage wasn't in the roles he played, but in the life he lived off-screen. From the moment he stepped into that spotlight in 2000, he wasn't just fighting Parkinson's, he was fighting for everyone who'd ever faced a battle they couldn't win alone. His foundation would go on to raise over $1 billion, funding research that brought hope to millions. But before the mission, before the fall, There was a kid with a dream, a spark that refused to fade. This is Michael J. Fox's story. Not just of a star, but of a fighter. If his courage moves you, share this story. Not for the fame, but for the fight behind it. In Burnaby, British Columbia, in the early 1960s, a small house on a quiet street held the spark of a future icon. Michael Andrew Fox was born on June 9, 1961, into a working-class family where dreams were often overshadowed by the grind of daily life. His father, William, was a police dispatcher and former army man, steady and pragmatic, while his mother, Phyllis, a payroll clerk, filled the home with warmth and encouragement. Michael, the fourth of 5 children, was the smallest, barely reaching 5 feet 4 inches, but his energy was boundless. He was a kid who moved fast, thought faster, and dreamed bigger than the suburbs that surrounded him. Burnaby wasn't a place of glamour. It was a world of modest homes, gray winters, and the hum of ordinary life. Yet, in that ordinary world, Michael found something extraordinary, a hunger to perform. As a child, Michael was a whirlwind of motion and mischief. He'd race through the neighborhood on his skateboard, cracking jokes, his quick wit already sharpening. His siblings called him a ham, always stealing the spotlight at family gatherings with impromptu skits or impressions. School, though, was a different story. He wasn't a star student. His grades were average, and his size made him an easy target for bullies. But Michael had a secret weapon, humor. He'd diffuse taunts with a quip, turning adversaries into allies with a grin. His laughter wasn't just a shield, it was a bridge, connecting him to others in a way that made him unforgettable. By 15, he found his true stage, not in the classroom, but in the local theater group, where he discovered acting wasn't just play, it was purpose. His first taste of performance came through a guitar, strummed in his bedroom to the sounds of the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix. Music was his escape, a way to dream beyond Burnaby's borders. But acting lit a different fire. He landed a role in a Canadian TV movie, Letters from Frank, at 15. His small frame and big charisma catching the eye of local producers. It was 1976, and Michael, barely a teenager, was already chasing a dream most kids his age couldn't imagine. His parents, though cautious, saw the spark in their son. Phyllis drove him to auditions, while William, ever the skeptic, warned him about the instability of show business. Yet Michael's determination was unshakable. He wasn't just chasing fame, he was chasing a feeling. That electric moment when an audience leaned in, captivated. At 17, Michael made a choice that would define his life. He dropped out of high school, packed his bags, and headed to Los Angeles with little more than a few $100s and a dream. Hollywood was a gamble, a city that chewed up young hopefuls and spit them out. His parents were torn, proud of his courage, terrified of his odds. Michael, though, saw it differently. To him, the risk wasn't failure, it was staying still. He arrived in LA in 1979. A scrawny Canadian kid with a funny accent and a resume thinner than his wallet. He couch-surfed, took odd jobs, and auditioned relentlessly, facing rejection after rejection. Directors loved his energy, but doubted his size, his youth, his unpolished edge. Still, Michael kept going, fueled by a belief that his moment was coming. Those early days in Hollywood weren't glamorous. He lived in a cramped apartment, scraping by on ramen and hope. But even in the struggle, there were glimpses of the Michael J. Fox the world would come to love. He'd charm casting directors with a quick joke, win over waitresses with his boyish grin. His optimism wasn't naive, it was defiant, a refusal to let the world's no define him. He landed small roles in shows like Leo and Me, a Canadian series, and bit parts in American TV, each one a stepping stone. But the rejections stung. He was too short, too young, too unknown, yet every no pushed him harder. Every closed door sharpened his resolve. Burnaby had given him roots, but it was his hunger that gave him wings. Back in that small Canadian town, he'd watched movies like Star Wars and Rocky, imagining himself on the screen. Now, in LA, he was closer than ever. But the gap between dream and reality felt vast. What kept him going was a belief that his size, his background, his ordinariness weren't weaknesses. They were his strength. He wasn't a chiseled leading man. He was the kid next door, relatable, real. That authenticity, that spark, would soon catch fire. The world didn't know it yet, but Michael J. Fox was about to step into a role that would change everything. A role that would make him a household name and set the stage for a life no one could have predicted. This is where it all began, not with a spotlight, but with a dream. Born in a small house in Burnaby, carried across borders by a kid who refused to stay small. If Michael's story resonates, share it. Not for the fame, but for the fight behind it. Los Angeles in 1979 was a city of dreamers, and Michael J. Fox was one of thousands. A scrawny 18-year-old from Canada, with a thin resume and a relentless drive. He'd left Burnaby behind, trading the safety of home for the uncertainty of Hollywood's casting rooms. The odds were brutal. Countless auditions, countless rejections. Directors saw his talent, but hesitated over his height, his youth, his unpolished charm. Yet Michael wasn't deterred. Every no was fuel, every closed door a challenge. He wasn't chasing fame for fame's sake. He was chasing the chance to prove he belonged. This was his climb, a grueling ascent marked by small victories, crushing setbacks, and a belief that kept him moving forward. His early days in LA were lean. He shared a cramped apartment with other struggling actors, surviving on cheap takeout and cheaper dreams. Auditions were a grind, long bus rides across the sprawling city, waiting hours for a 5-minute chance to shine. He landed bit parts, like a guest spot on the TV show Lou Grant. But the roles were small, the pay smaller. Between auditions, he worked odd jobs, from telemarketing to washing dishes, anything to keep the lights on. His parents called often, worried, urging him to come home. But Michael's answer was always the same. "I'm not done yet." His optimism wasn't blind. It was stubborn. A refusal to let Hollywood's indifference break him. A turning point came in 1980, when he landed a role in the CBS sitcom, Palmerstown, USA. It wasn't a hit, but it was a start, a chance to learn the rhythms of a set, to hone his craft. Producers noticed his quick wit, his ability to steal a scene with a single line. Still, the show folded after 2 seasons, and Michael was back to square one. He faced rejection after rejection, hearing the same critiques. Too short, too boyish, too unknown. But Michael had a gift, his relatability. He wasn't a towering leading man. He was the guy you rooted for, the underdog with a spark in his eye. That spark caught the attention of a casting director for a new NBC sitcom, Family Ties. In 1982, at 21, Michael auditioned for the role of Alex P. Keaton, the conservative suit-wearing son in a liberal family. The part wasn't written for him. Producers wanted someone older, more established. But Michael walked into the room and owned it. His audition was electric, blending sharp humor with a warmth that made Alex more than a caricature. He wasn't just funny. He was magnetic, turning a supporting role into the show's heartbeat. When Family Ties premiered in September 1982, Audiences fell in love. Alex P. Keaton, with his Reagan-loving quips and boyish charm, became a cultural icon. Michael, the kid who'd been told he was too small, was now a rising star. The success of Family Ties changed everything. Michael's face was on magazine covers, his name on casting lists. He was still living paycheck to paycheck, but the buzz was building. He worked tirelessly, memorizing scripts, perfecting every line. His co-stars marveled at his energy, his ability to make long shooting days feel like play. Off-set, though, life wasn't glamorous. He was still the same kid from Burnaby, calling his mom to share small wins, saving up to buy his first car. But the grind was paying off. By 1984, Family Ties was a hit, and Michael was no longer an unknown. Hollywood was starting to believe in him just as he'd always believed in himself. Then came the call that would redefine his life. In 1984, director Robert Zemeckis was casting a sci-fi adventure called Back to the Future. The lead role, Marty McFly, needed someone with heart, humor, and an everyman quality. A time-traveling teenager who could make the impossible feel real. Michael was the first choice, but Family Ties commitments made it impossible. The role went to another actor, but when filming stalled, Zemeckis came back. Michael, burning the candle at both ends, took the leap. He shot Family Ties by day, Back to the Future by night, sleeping in snatches between sets. It was grueling, but Michael thrived on the chaos. His climb wasn't over, but the summit was in sight. This was Michael J. Fox becoming someone, not just a name, but a force. The kid from Burnaby, who'd bet everything on a dream, was on the cusp of changing the world. If his hustle inspires you, share this story. Not for the fame, but for the fight behind it. In the summer of 1985, Michael J. Fox became a name the world couldn't ignore. Back to the Future hit theaters on July 3rd, and overnight, the 24-year-old from Burnaby was no longer just a sitcom star, he was a global phenomenon. As Marty McFly, the skateboarding, guitar-shredding teenager who raced through time in a DeLorean, Michael captured the imagination of millions. His performance was electric, blending humor, heart, and an effortless cool that made every kid want to be him and every parent root for him. The film wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural juggernaut, grossing nearly $400 million and cementing Michael as Hollywood's golden boy. This was the moment the world listened, the moment Michael J. Fox became a star. The road to Back to the Future was anything but easy. In 1984, Michael was already juggling a demanding schedule on Family Ties, where his role as Alex P. Keaton had made him a household name. When director Robert Zemeckis first approached him for Marty McFly, Michael was the top choice, but his sitcom commitments made it impossible. The role went to another actor, and Michael thought he'd missed his shot. But fate had other plans. When production issues arose, Zemeckis came back, determined to have Michael. The catch? He'd have to film Family Ties by day and Back to the Future by night, sleeping in stolen moments between sets. Most would have buckled under the pressure, but Michael thrived. He was 23, fueled by adrenaline and ambition, racing between studios like Marty racing through Hill Valley. When Back to the Future premiered, it was clear Michael wasn't just playing a role. He was defining one. His chemistry with Christopher Lloyd's Doc Brown was magic. His every line a spark. Audiences laughed when he shredded Johnny B. Good, cheered when he outsmarted Biff, and believed in the impossible because Michael made it real. Critics raved, calling him a natural, a once-in-a-generation talent. The film's success catapulted him to a level of fame few could fathom. Suddenly, he was everywhere. On magazine covers, talk shows, billboards. Fans mobbed him in the streets, chanting, "Marty!" His boyish grin became a symbol of the 80s, a decade that felt like it belonged to him. Family Ties soared to new heights on the back of his fame. Alex P. Keaton, once a supporting role, became the show's heart. With episodes written to showcase Michael's comedic timing and emotional depth, he won 3 Emmys for the role, proof that his talent wasn't just a fluke. Hollywood opened its doors wide. Offers poured in. Movies, endorsements, projects that promised millions. In 1987, he starred in The Secret of My Success, another hit that showed he could carry a film beyond Marty McFly. By 1989, Back to the Future. Part 2 and Part 3 were in production, solidifying his place as a franchise star. At 28, Michael J. Fox wasn't just a name, he was an industry. But fame came with a cost. The kid from Burnaby was now a celebrity, his life no longer his own. Paparazzi trailed his every move. Fans crowded his personal space. He married actress Tracy Pollan in 1988, a quiet anchor in the storm of stardom. But even love couldn't shield him from the pressure. He worked non-stop, filming movies back-to-back, while Family Ties ran its final seasons. Sleep was a luxury, privacy a memory. He was living the dream he'd chased since dropping out of high school. But the dream was relentless. Every smile for the camera, every autograph, every interview demanded a piece of him. And then, in 1991, a subtle tremor in his hand hinted at a shadow no amount of fame could outrun. This was Michael's moment of triumph, when the world leaned in and listened. He'd climbed from a small town to the top of Hollywood, proving that heart and hustle could outshine doubt. But even as the crowds cheered, a quiet challenge was growing, one that would test not just his career, but his spirit. If Michael's rise inspires you, share this story, not for the fame, but for the fight behind it. By the late 1980s, Michael J. Fox was at the pinnacle of Hollywood, a crown forged by Back to the Future and Family Ties. At 28, he was a global star, his face on every magazine, his name synonymous with charm and success. He had it all: blockbuster films, Emmy Awards, a loving marriage to Tracy Pollan, and a son, Sam, born in 1989. The world saw him as Marty McFly, the eternal optimist, the kid who could outrun time itself. But behind the spotlight, the weight of fame was heavy, and a silent curse was creeping in, a tremor that would soon upend his life. This was the paradox of Michael's peak, a crown that glittered, and a curse that loomed. The demands of stardom were relentless. Michael's schedule was a blur of film sets, press junkets, and public appearances. After Back to the Future Part 2 and Part 3 solidified his franchise legacy, he starred in films like Doc Hollywood and The Hard Way, proving his versatility. Each role was a chance to stretch, but also a grind. He'd wake at dawn for Family Ties tapings, fly across the country for movie shoots, and still make time for interviews, smiling through exhaustion. Fans adored him, but their love was a double-edged sword. He couldn't walk down the street without being mobbed, his privacy shrinking with every headline. Tracy, his rock, grounded him. But even their quiet moments were interrupted by the world's demands. In 1991, during the filming of Doc Hollywood, Michael noticed something unsettling, a twitch in his pinky finger, subtle but persistent. At first, he brushed it off as stress, the toll of years spent burning the candle at both ends. He was 29, invincible in the eyes of the world, but his body was sending a warning. He sought medical advice, expecting a simple fix. Instead, he received a diagnosis that stopped him cold. Parkinson's disease, a progressive neurological condition with no cure. The doctor's words were stark. His symptoms would worsen. His career might end. His future was uncertain. Michael, the eternal optimist, felt the ground shift beneath him. How could this happen to someone so young, so alive? He kept the diagnosis a secret, sharing it only with Tracy and a handful of trusted friends. To the world, he was still the golden boy, cracking jokes on talk shows, charming audiences with his wit. But behind closed doors, the reality was different. The tremor grew harder to hide, spreading to his hand, then his arm. Simple tasks, buttoning a shirt, holding a coffee cup, became challenges. He turned to alcohol to cope, a crutch to dull the fear and uncertainty. Nights that once ended in laughter now ended in quiet dread, as he wondered what his life would become. Tracy stood by him, fierce and unwavering, but even her strength couldn't erase the question that haunted him. Could he keep going? The industry didn't slow down for him. Hollywood demanded more films, more appearances, more of the Michael J. Fox the world expected. He pushed through, starring in The American President and For Love or Money, delivering performances that hid his struggle. On set, he'd time his movements to mask the tremors, a secret choreography no one noticed. But the effort was exhausting. The crown of fame, once a symbol of triumph, now felt like a weight, pressing down on a man fighting a battle no one could see. His humor, his greatest asset, became his shield, but even that couldn't fully protect him from the growing reality of his condition. Michael's personal life became his refuge. Tracy and Sam were his anchor, their home a sanctuary from the chaos of fame. But the disease crept into those moments too, a reminder that time was no longer on his side. He began to question his identity. Was he still Marty McFly? Could he still be the star the world loved? The pressure to perform, to maintain the image of the carefree hero, clashed with the man grappling with a future he couldn't control. The curse wasn't just Parkinson's. It was the cost of living in a spotlight that demanded perfection, while his body fought to betray him. This was Michael J. Fox at his peak, wearing a crown forged by talent and grit, but shadowed by a curse that would test his spirit. The world saw a star. He saw a fight. If his resilience moves you, share this story, not for the fame, but for the fight behind it. By 1998, Michael J. Fox's world was unraveling. The star who'd once raced through time as Marty McFly was now caught in a different kind of race, one against a disease that was stealing his control. Diagnosed with Parkinson's at 29, he'd spent 7 years hiding the truth, masking tremors with meticulous timing and his trademark grin. But the secret was growing harder to keep. The tremors spread, his movements less predictable, his energy sapped by the effort to appear normal. At 37, with a career still soaring and a young family to anchor him, Michael faced his darkest chapter. This was his fall, not a scandal or a public failure, but a private collapse under the weight of a relentless illness. The decision to go public came after years of denial. By the mid-1990s, Michael was still a Hollywood heavyweight, starring in films like The Frighteners and guest roles on shows like Spin City, where he played a charismatic political aide. On set, he was a pro, hiding his symptoms with clever tricks, keeping his hands in his pockets, timing his lines to mask shakes. But the effort was exhausting, a performance more grueling than any role. Off-screen, the strain was even heavier. Alcohol became a crutch, a way to quiet the fear that crept in at night. He'd drink to numb the questions. How long could he keep this up? What would happen to his career, his family, his identity? Tracy, his wife, saw the toll, urging him to face the truth. But Michael, ever the optimist, clung to the hope that he could outrun Parkinson's. The breaking point came in 1998. The tremors were no longer subtle. They were a daily battle. Simple tasks, tying his shoes, holding his son Sam, became tests of will. On the set of Spin City, his colleagues began to notice, though Michael deflected with humor, the charade was crumbling. He confided in his Spin City creator, Gary David Goldberg, who urged him to stop hiding. Michael knew the truth would change everything. Going public meant risking his career, his image as the eternal kid who could do anything. But keeping the secret was suffocating him. In November 1998, he sat down with People magazine and told the world he had Parkinson's disease. The headlines were deafening, a mix of shock and sympathy. Fans mourned the golden boy. Tabloids speculated on his future. Michael, though, felt a strange relief. The mask was off, but the weight of the truth was heavier than he'd imagined. The aftermath was a storm. The public's love poured in. Letters, messages, prayers. But so did pity, something Michael hated. Hollywood's offers slowed. Producers hesitated, unsure if he could still perform. Spin City remained a hit, but Michael's energy was fading. The medication helped control symptoms but brought side effects. Dyskinesia, fatigue, moments of fog. He'd push through long shooting days, then collapse at home, wrestling with guilt over the strain on Tracy and their 3 children. His drinking worsened, a spiral that threatened to pull him under. One night, after passing out on the couch, he woke to Tracy's quiet resolve. "This isn't working." It was a wake-up call. He began to confront not just Parkinson's, but his own fear of losing control. The fall wasn't just physical, it was emotional, existential. Michael had built his life on motion, on the hustle that took him from Burnaby to Hollywood. Now that motion was betraying him. He questioned everything. Could he still be a father, a husband, a star? The roles that defined him felt out of reach. He stepped back from Spin City in 2000, a decision that felt like surrender. The world saw a hero stepping away gracefully. Michael felt like he was letting go of the only life he knew. The spotlight dimmed, and in its absence, doubt crept in. He retreated to his family, to quiet moments that felt both precious and painful. The kid who'd once leaped onto a DeLorean was now navigating a body that refused to cooperate. This was Michael J. Fox's darkest hour, when the world's applause faded and the reality of his fight took center stage. He wasn't just battling Parkinson's, he was battling the fear of becoming less than the man he'd been. If his courage in the face of this fall moves you, share this story, not for the fame, but for the fight behind it. In the spring of 2000, Michael J. Fox stepped away from Spin City, leaving behind the frenetic world of Hollywood for a quieter life. At 38, the man who'd once raced through time as Marty McFly found himself in unfamiliar stillness. Parkinson's disease had forced his hand, its symptoms, tremors, stiffness, unpredictable movements, making the demands of a lead role unsustainable. The public saw a graceful exit, a star bowing out with dignity. But for Michael, it was a retreat into uncertainty, a silence that felt both like refuge and reckoning. This was the aftermath of his fall, a time to confront not just his illness, but the man he was becoming when the cameras stopped rolling. The world beyond Hollywood was disorienting. For nearly 2 decades, Michael's life had been defined by scripts, sets, and schedules. Now his days were open, unstructured, filled with the hum of family life in New York, where he lived with Tracy and their 3 children, Sam, now 11, and twins Aquina and Skylar. Highs. 5. The quiet was a gift. letting him be a father in ways his career had often stolen. He'd read bedtime stories, cheer at soccer games, and savor small moments, a laugh over breakfast, a walk with Tracy. But the silence also amplified his fears. Parkinson's was progressing, its symptoms more pronounced. Simple acts, cutting food, writing a note, required focus, patience, a humility he was still learning. The disease was a constant companion, a reminder that control was slipping away. Michael wrestled with his identity. He'd been the eternal optimist, the kid who turned rejections into stepping stones. But now doubt crept in. Could he still be the husband Tracy deserved? The father his kids needed? The world still saw him as a star, but he felt like a man unmoored. His drinking, a crutch during his darkest years, had eased after a reckoning with Tracy, but the emotional weight lingered. He began therapy, confronting the anger and grief he'd buried under humor. For the first time, he let himself feel the loss, not just of his career, but of the future he'd imagined. It was painful, raw, a dismantling of the Michael J. Fox the world knew. Yet, in that quiet, seeds of purpose began to grow. Michael had launched the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research in 2000, a bold move born of his diagnosis. In the silence of his post-Spin City life, he dove deeper into this work. The foundation wasn't just a cause, it was a lifeline, a way to channel his fight into something bigger. He read up on Parkinson's, met with scientists, and connected with patients whose stories mirrored his own. Their struggles gave him perspective. Their hope gave him strength. He wasn't just a patient, he was a voice, a catalyst. The foundation raised millions, funding research that promised breakthroughs. For Michael, it was a way to reclaim agency, to fight back against a disease that sought to define him. Tracy was his anchor through it all. Her steadiness, her refusal to let him sink into self-pity, kept him grounded. They'd face the disease together, she'd promised, and she meant it. Their home became a sanctuary, filled with laughter despite the challenges. Michael's humor, once his shield, became his bridge again, connecting him to his kids, to Tracy, to himself. He'd joke about his tremors, calling them his dance moves, making his children giggle. But there were nights when the silence was heavy, when he'd lie awake, wondering how much time he had before Parkinson's took more. This period wasn't about grand gestures or public triumphs. It was about small, deliberate steps, rebuilding his sense of self, redefining what mattered. Michael began writing, pouring his thoughts into what would become his first memoir, Lucky Man. The process was cathartic, a way to make sense of his journey. He wasn't ready to return to the spotlight, but he was finding his voice in a new way. The silence wasn't empty. It was a space to reflect, to heal, to discover what came next. The kid from Burnaby, who'd once dreamed of conquering Hollywood, was learning to conquer something far harder: himself. This was Michael J. Fox in the quiet after the storm, a man finding strength in stillness, purpose in pain. If his journey through this silence moves you, share this story, not for the fame, but for the fight behind it. By 2002, Michael J. Fox was emerging from the shadows of his quiet years, not as the Hollywood heartthrob of the 80s, but as a man redefined by purpose. Parkinson's disease had forced him to step back from the spotlight, to confront a life where control was no longer certain. Yet, in that stillness, he'd found a new mission. The Michael J. Fox Foundation, launched in 2000, was gaining momentum, raising millions for Parkinson's research. His memoir, Lucky Man, published in 2002, laid bare his struggles and resilience, earning praise for its honesty and humor. This wasn't the comeback of a star chasing fame, it was the rise of a fighter reclaiming his voice. Michael J. Fox was back, not to reclaim his past, but to rewrite his future. The foundation became his anchor. What began as a personal fight had grown into a global movement. Michael threw himself into advocacy, meeting with researchers, lobbying Congress, and speaking to patients who saw him as their champion. His charm, once used to win over casting directors, now persuaded donors and scientists to join the cause. He wasn't a doctor or a scientist, but he was a storyteller, and he used that gift to humanize Parkinson's. He'd share his own struggles, tremors that made mornings a battle, medications that dulled symptoms but clouded his mind, making others feel seen. By 2005, the foundation had funded over $100 million in research, pushing for treatments and a cure. Michael wasn't just living with Parkinson's, he was fighting it for millions. Acting too called him back, but on his terms. In 2001, he returned to Spin City for a guest arc, proving he could still command a scene despite his symptoms. He took on voice roles like Stuart Little and guest spots on shows like Scrubs and Boston Legal, earning Emmy nominations for his work. Each role was a victory, not over Parkinson's, but over the fear that he'd lost his craft. He was open about his condition on set, working with directors to accommodate his needs. The kid who'd once hidden his tremors now embraced them, joking with co-stars about his unique choreography. His performances weren't about perfection. They were about presence, a testament to his refusal to be defined by his illness. Family remained his cornerstone. Tracy and their children, Sam, Aquina, Skylar, and later Esme, born in 2001, gave him a reason to keep going. He was a hands-on dad, coaching Little League, helping with homework, and finding joy in the chaos of parenthood. Parkinson's made these moments harder. Tremors could turn a simple hug into a challenge, but Michael leaned into them. He'd laugh when his kids teased his shaky hands, turning vulnerability into connection. Tracy's unwavering support was his strength. She didn't just stand by him, she pushed him to keep fighting, to keep living. Their partnership was a quiet rebellion against the disease's attempt to steal their life. Writing became another outlet. Lucky Man was a hit, resonating with readers who saw not just a star, but a man grappling with mortality. In 2009, he published Always Looking Up, a second memoir that captured his growing optimism and advocacy. These books weren't just about Parkinson's, they were about resilience, about finding meaning in the face of loss. Michael's voice, sharp and witty, reached beyond his illness, inspiring people facing their own battles. He wasn't preaching, he was sharing, his humor a bridge to connect with readers who'd never met him but felt like they knew him. In 2013, he took a bold step with The Michael J. Fox Show, a sitcom loosely based on his life. The show tackled Parkinson's head-on, blending comedy with raw honesty. It was a risk, critics were mixed, and the show lasted only one season. But for Michael, it was a triumph. He'd returned to the screen, not as Marty McFly, but as himself, a man living with a disease and still daring to dream. By 2023, his documentary, Still, a Michael J. Fox movie, brought his story to a new generation, earning acclaim for its unflinching look at his journey. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was standing taller, tremors and all. This was Michael J. Fox's return, not to the spotlight, but to a life of purpose. He'd found a way to rise again, not by outrunning Parkinson's, but by embracing it as part of his story. If his courage inspires you, share this story, not for the fame, but for the fight behind it. Michael J. Fox's life is a story of time. Time chased, time stolen, time redefined. At 64, he stands as more than a Hollywood icon, More than Marty McFly or Alex P. Keaton, he is a symbol of resilience, a man who turned a personal battle into a global mission. Parkinson's disease, diagnosed when he was just 29, could have dimmed his light, but instead, it ignited a legacy that burns brighter than any spotlight. Through his foundation, his words, and his unwavering spirit, Michael has changed the world, not just for those with Parkinson's, but for anyone who's ever faced an impossible fight. This is what remains forever: a legacy of hope, humor, and heart. The Michael J. Fox Foundation, launched in 2000, is the cornerstone of his impact. By 2025, it has raised over $2 billion, funding research that has transformed the landscape of Parkinson's science. Michael's vision, clear, relentless, and optimistic, pushed for bold ideas, from new therapies to potential cures. He wasn't a scientist, but he was a catalyst, bringing together researchers, patients, and policymakers. He testified before Congress, spoke at global conferences, and met countless patients, listening to their stories with the same warmth he brought to his roles. His foundation didn't just fund studies, it gave people hope, a belief that tomorrow could be better. For millions living with Parkinson's, Michael's name is synonymous with possibility. His creative work endures as well. Back to the Future remains a cultural touchstone, its DeLorean a symbol of adventure and nostalgia. Younger generations discover Marty McFly on streaming platforms, laughing at the same lines that captivated audiences in 1985, Family. Ties and Spin City still resonate, showcasing Michael's gift for blending humor with humanity. His memoirs, Lucky Man and Always Looking Up, are more than celebrity tell-alls. They're blueprints for resilience, read by people facing their own challenges, from illness to loss. His 2023 documentary, Still, a Michael J. Fox movie, brought his story to new audiences. Its raw honesty earning an Emmy and reminding the world why his voice matters. But Michael's legacy isn't just in his work, it's in his humanity. He's shown the world what it means to live with grace under pressure. Parkinson's has taken much: his physical ease, his unscripted spontaneity. But it hasn't taken his spirit. He's open about his struggles. The days when tremors make simple tasks daunting. The moments of frustration when his body betrays him. Yet he faces them with humor, joking about his new normal with the same wit that won over Hollywood. His family, Tracy, Sam, Aquina, Skylar, and Esme, remains his foundation. Their love, their laughter, their shared resilience are a testament to a life built on connection, not just achievement. Michael's story teaches us that legacy isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. He didn't conquer Parkinson's, but he refused to let it define him. He's shown that strength isn't in denying pain, but in embracing it, using it to fuel something greater. His advocacy has inspired others to fight their own battles, whether with illness, doubt, or fear. Fans write to him, sharing how his courage helped them face cancer, loss, or their own diagnoses. Strangers thank him in grocery stores, not for his movies, but for his fight. He's become a beacon, proof that a single life can ripple across the world. As he moves forward, Michael remains active, writing, speaking, and advocating. Even as Parkinson's progresses, he's candid about the challenges, falls, fatigue, the unpredictability of each day, but he's equally candid about the joy he finds in small moments. A family dinner, a good laugh, a quiet walk with Tracy. His optimism isn't naive. It's a choice, a defiance against despair. He said it himself, "I'm not going anywhere, but I'm not staying still." That's Michael J. Fox. Not just a star, but a fighter, a father, a force who redefined what it means to live fully in the face of time's limits. His legacy is a reminder that we all have a choice to let our struggles define us or to let them inspire us. Michael chose inspiration, and the world is better for it. If his story touches your heart, share it, not for the fame, but for the fight behind it. In the end, Michael J. Fox's light shines not in the roles he played, but in the lives he's changed, the hope he's sparked, and the time he's given back to the world.